Tetragrammaton. Tetragrammaton.
1981, August 181, we launched. And that world was a world of no information. There were 3 TV networks, ABC, NBC, CBS.
Still.
And they decided when you were going to see programming. HBO had come along in the mid-70s. There had been no really advertiser-supported networks, which of course MTV was. And there was an idea at the time that the consumer wanted choice, which we know is always true, and that instead of network programmers deciding when you could see kids programming, music programming, news, sports, you would go to these 24-hour channels and get it at any time. So you put together your own array of programming that matched your needs.
That was a really new thing.
Think of it as a poor man's on-demand. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no technology for on-demand then. So this was a way where you're going to get choice. So Turner launched CNN. A bunch of guys up in Bristol launched ESPN.
Those were in the 70s?
No, it was about 1980, I guess, along when we
Right
are.
there.
We're all right there together.
How many homes had cable at this time?
Think about 15 million. And so we developed this idea for a music service, all music. And I think the music had been on TV off and on for years and years, never particularly successful. And our thesis was it wasn't successful because they kept trying to make music fit the TV form, which was a narrative. So with MTV said, we're going to make TV fit the music form, which is mood, emotion, makes you feel a certain way. Music's better than any drug for taking you to certain moods or where you want to go. And you had a generation that had grown up with TV. We were the first of the TV babies, my generation, and rock and roll, but the two had never come together. So the idea was, we're going to put it together. And there were all these little video clips that had been produced. No one had been able to figure out what to do with them. So that was the general concept of what we were doing. The venture was owned by Warner and American Express 50-50, called Warner Amex. The board of directors wouldn't approve the idea, thought it was way too risky. So he got a meeting with Jim Robinson, who was the CEO of American Express. His lieutenant, his president, was Lou Gershner, who went on to fame at Nabisco and IBM, and Steve Ross from Warner Communications, David Horowitz, you probably remember, Office of the President, Warner. We got a meeting with him to pitch him the idea. And we think the hard sell is going to be American Express. And then inside Warner, there's this other thing brewing that the music companies were saying, wait a minute, if you do a music channel, we should do it, not that joint venture. And so there was, lots of turmoil and dramas, there always are. And toward the end of the meeting, Jim Robinson, who is the chairman of American Express, looks at Steve and goes, I'm in for my 10 million. Steve, how about you? And he called the question, and Steve goes, yeah, I'm in. And that was the way we got approval to go.
Amazing. Was that the first time you ever met Steve Ross?
No, I met Steve a couple of times before, and David Horowitz sort of fell in love with me. And David was responsible for the cable company and the Warner Amex joint venture and had brought me to meetings. And Steve as we launched MTV, got very interested in it. And Steve wound up being one of my great mentors. And Steve would later put his arm around me and just say, come on with me to whatever. Meetings had nothing to do with music or MTV, but he was just letting me in and letting me see stuff and see how it worked. And I had been involved with some of the other stuff because originally I came over from NBC. The first channel we were going to do was a pay service, sort of like at HBO. It was called the Movie Channel. At that time, HBO was only on in prime time. It was off the rest of the day.
Really?
So we did a 24-hour all-movie service.
Great idea.
Which is great. And then
Great
HBO
idea.
realized what we were doing,
Yeah.
so they started what is called a fighting brand. I had no idea what a fighting brand was, but learned very quickly, called Cinemax. And they made it cheaper to the cable operator, and they got more movies.
So it was just a ripoff of what you were doing.
Yeah. Obviously, we proved that there was an opening.
Yeah.
They came in, and so I had known Steve through the Movie Channel and through what we were doing with the Movie Channel and movies. But MTV is really what sort of turbocharged my relationship with him.
It's an amazing story. I remember the impact it had on my life. It felt like there was the world before MTV and after MTV, if you were a kid at that time.
And you know what's interesting is it had some interesting ancillary benefits, which we didn't realize. The three networks controlled what you saw, and they made everything look like it basically was Des Moines. Everything was middle America. You didn't see what people in New York were wearing or London or. And when MTV came on, suddenly all these kids across America got to see what people in New York and LA and London were wearing, and fashions changed immediately. I think it was 1984. I got a CFDA award, the Council of Fashion Designers Award, for the impact MTV had on fashion.
Amazing.
And we also changed sort of the graphic look. At the time we launched MTV, every graphic design looked like Star Wars logos, and the car dealer, everybody had it. And we came out with this sort of radically different design and opened people's eyes to, no, it doesn't have to be the way you said it has to be.
Tell me about the I Want My MTV program.
Well, the problem was that the cable operators really didn't want to take MTV because they were at that time charging companies for the access to the cable, like 25 cents a month. We didn't have 25 cents a month. So we said, well, another idea. One of the guys that worked for me was a Harvard MBA and was always whispering to me all this stuff. He goes, we should do consumer pull. And I go, what's that? He goes, that's when you get the consumers to demand the product instead of push distribution where you buy it. I go, great, sign me up. And so we hit upon this idea that we would come up with ad campaign to advertise MTV, and that the cable operator then would think they had to carry it because there was such consumer outcry. And a guy named George Lois and a guy named Dale Pond, who'd been my promotions director at WNBC, they had an agency together. We hired them. And they came back originally with some spot that said, America's becoming a land of cable brats and blah, 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 blah. But embedded in that, call your cable company and say, I want my MTV. Well, Tom Freston was our marketing guy, and John Sykes was our promotion guy, and Fred Seibert was the on-air look guy. I remember they all came over to my apartment on one night. I was on Central Park West, and we go through all this, and we go, trying to land of cable brats is sort of cheesy and doesn't connect, but that I Want My MTV is exactly what we want. So we sort of recrafted the whole spot to be I Want My MTV. And George Lois had done a campaign in the 60s called I Want My Maypo with Mickey Mantle. As often happens, sort of repurposed it for I Want My MTV. And we didn't have a lot of money, but we would go market by market where they weren't carrying MTV, and we would run this campaign, and the kids would all call the cable company, and they would flood the cable company and tie up all their phones, and they go, okay, we'll put it on. And after about 2 or 3 markets, we actually didn't have to put it on. We just had to threaten that we were going to do it because everybody had heard. I go, okay, we're getting ready to advertise in your market. You sure you don't want to go ahead and put it on? Yeah, we'll put it on. And so that drove it. And it's interesting because MTV was a sort of success with the consumer immediately, but a dismal failure economically with advertisers and with the cable operators. So we really had to go redo the sort of business side of it. And that's ultimately how I went from being the creative guy, the head creative guy, to running the network.
So tell me about going from the creative guy to the business guy. It's a very different hat.
They came to me and said, look, this thing's not working. We projected we were going to do 10 million in revenue first year. I think we did $500,000 in ad revenue. Thought the cable operators would all come flying. And, as we said with the I Want My MTV campaign, didn't quite work out that way. And I was doing the marketing, all the marketing and the creative stuff. There was another guy who was doing all the sales stuff. And they came to me and said, hey, kid, do you think you can run this thing? And of course, as every 28 or 29-year-old would go, I go, yeah, sure. And in my head, my calculus was, I was so sick of having to convince salespeople that I had a good idea. And they had this veto, go, oh, we can't sell that. I can't do that. So I go, hey, I have total creative freedom now. If I'm running this thing, I can choose anything. Of course, what I failed to realize was once I'm running the business side, I got no time to be the creative. But that's sort of how I made the jump. And I discovered I actually loved the business side, and it was just as creative as the creative side, and bringing a lot of creativity and a new approach and willing to take chances. And by the way, not knowing too much turned out to be a real benefit.
Yeah, it seems like it's often the case. Like you don't know what you don't know, and that works to your advantage.
Right. But I also was so focused, I knew what we were trying to do. So I had this great prism, this great filter
Hmm.
of what MTV was and what it wasn't. And I think every product has this. I was the keeper of the vision.
Yeah.
Like I was the editor in chief. I would say that belongs, that doesn't. It's not that that's a good idea or that's a bad idea. They don't fit together.
And you're probably also better at managing and dealing with creative people because you understood
Absolutely.
you were not a bean counter.
No. And by the way, I was still actively involved. Making that jump was just sort of opened up my life. And I began to see, oh, it all turns into dollars and cents. And I love the profit motive. My dad was nonprofit, was a minister, and I heard many dinner table conversations. Oh, so and so. You just go, wow, it's really hard because you got to keep everybody happy and everybody's got conflicting agendas. In business, it's like it's profit. I mean, ultimately, it's a business,
Yeah.
and we should get a return on investment.
Yeah.
And that's the reason somebody invested in MTV instead of a railroad, because they get a better return, or they like the likelihood's a better return. And once you figure that out, you go, okay, well, let's sort of figure this out. And on the advertising front, no one wanted to buy cable advertising. It was like the agencies were like, no way. And everybody thought that these ad supporting networks would never work because the audiences were so small compared to the three big broadcast networks, even though we were targeted. So we figured out the agencies were probably not our friends. They had no vested interest. So, like, if somebody's spending $100 on TV and they only have to buy three networks, why would they want to encourage the people to spend it on 20 networks, the same $100? Because it would just drive their cost up.
Hmm.
I get it. So we figured out what we've got to do is we've got to go to the clients and get them to demand it. And fortunately, we had a wonderful guy named Roger Enrico who ran Pepsi Cola. And Roger figured out very quickly kids love this. There were no ratings, they just had to use your gut. And by the way, Coca Cola didn't advertise on MTV for 6 years because it was not measurable.
Hmm.
At first, there were no ratings.
Hmm.
Then, when the ratings came out, we said we didn't fit their criteria. They needed 65% reach of the country and a three national rating. We didn't have any of that. So forget it, go away. Oh, by the way, in that period of time, Roger Enrico moved the market share the most it's ever been moved before or after on Pepsi when he had an exclusive on MTV.
Wow.
And it was so powerful having that exclusive that Coke, if you recall, came out with the new Coke. They thought they had a product problem.
Yes.
So they developed a whole new product called New Coke.
Yes.
Turns out it wasn't that. It was that Pepsi was advertising on MTV and Coke was missing. And when Coke finally figured that out, they outspent Pepsi 2-1 for the next 10 years.
Wow.
But we went to people like Pepsi. And the way we got Pepsi is not by saying we'll buy some spots. It was like, we'll do some great stuff with you. We'll do a special about music and Pepsi. And it was really using our creative chops, which I had and which our people had, to talk to advertisers in a different way. And we would go to the movie companies who would say, hey, let's do a world premiere of your picture. And I remember we did Prince, and I forgot what was that movie after Purple
Purple Rain.
Rain. After it was
Under the Cherry Moon.
Under the Cherry Moon, and we did a contest where people would send in, and we pick one, and we did the premiere in their town. It turned out to be Sheridan, Wyoming. And you can imagine Prince in Sheridan, Wyoming, and all the MTV people descending on that town.
Yeah.
But we would come up with ideas that would cause the advertiser, oh, I want that. And then we'd say, well, you got to spend $1 million on media as well to be able to get that. And they would call the agency and say, buy MTV. And so that's the way we broke through. And we were the first profitable basic cable network. We had the highest
Amazing.
ad revenue of any of the basic cable networks at the time. From our standpoint, we sort of cracked the code on it. The other thing we cracked the code on is how to do stuff cheaper. TV production was very expensive. It was rooted in the past. When I was at NBC, I did a TV show after Saturday Night Live, sort of a little teaser for what MTV became.
What
And
was
so
that?
it
What
was
was that
called
called?
Album Tracks. Ironically, my co-host was a guy named Jarl Moan, called Lee Masters on the air at the
Oh,
time,
amazing.
who was also doing the morning show at WNBC.
Hmm.
And the president of NBC, Herb Schlosser, loved me, said, you're going to TV. I want you to get some TV experience here. Do anything you want to after Saturday Night Live. Take this short time slot. But in that process, I could sort of see how they were producing, and it seemed so slow and antiquated. And NBC was bragging about the fact that they'd gone from 2 operators for every videotape machine to 1. They cut the cost of people in half to run their videotape machines. When we launched MTV, we had one operator for 30 machines. So we figured out how to just take quantum leaps in like,
Yeah.
and I mean, it
Efficiency.
sounds quaint today, but back then, let's go to the new tech. Let's use the new technology, not the old. Let's think about things in a new way. And again, going back to the point you made, not knowing
Yeah.
was our greatest gift. And everybody, and we were marked it a couple of times, is nobody at MTV had ever done the job they had before.
In general, do you try to find people who you think are smart and creative and who haven't done a job before when you're looking for people?
Yeah, it's funny. I am willing to do that. And by the way, my big breaks in life were because people gave me the shot to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I probably don't do it as much as I should.
Mm.
It requires you really to get in and understand the person and to have faith in them. But I do think every time I give somebody a job that's a big jump from where they were, they are spectacular performers.
Mm.
And often when you give people the same job for the third time, the performance is pretty mediocre.
In a world of artificial highs and harsh stimulants, there is something different, something clean, something precise. Athletic nicotine. Not the primitive products found behind convenience store counters. Not the aggressive buzz that leaves you jittery, but a careful calibration of clean energy and focused clarity. Athletic nicotine. The lowest dose tobacco-free nicotine available. Made entirely in the USA. No artificial sweetener, just pure, purposeful elevation. Athletic nicotine is a performance nootropic. Athletic nicotine is a tool for shifting mindsets. Athletic nicotine is a partner in pursuit of excellence. Slow release, low dose, gradual lift, sustained energy, soft landing, inspired results. Athletic nicotine, more focus, less static. Athletic nicotine, more clarity, less noise. Athletic nicotine, more accuracy, less anxiety. Athletic nicotine, from top athletes pushing their limits to artists pursuing their vision. Athletic nicotine offers the lift you've been looking for. Learn more at athleticnicotine.com/tetra and experience next level performance with Athletic Nicotine.
Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical.
You were an on-air DJ when you were young?
Yes, I was.
Tell me about that.
I started as a on-air DJ in Brookhaven, Mississippi, age 15. Little small towns couldn't afford to hire real talent, so they would hire high school kids for most of the shifts, pay them minimum wage. And I needed a job to pay for flying lessons.
Already then you were interested in flying.
Oh, that was what drove me to media. Was I needed a job. My dad had a friend who had a little airplane, 2-seater, took me up in the 5th grade, and it was like, what changed my life? You live in little small town America. You think the world is contained, and you get in an airplane. I've never been in a commercial airliner. I had my pilot's license before I ever flew in a commercial airliner.
Wow.
So I take off in this thing, and you go, what? The control, you see everything, you sense it. I don't know what that feeling is.
Sense of freedom, is that part of it?
It must be. It's freedom, it's control, it's seeing. It's actually, you see stuff from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm always drawn to seeing something from a perspective I've never seen before. And my grandfather, when I would go visit him, would take me to the little airport in Picayune, Mississippi, and just let me climb all over planes all day. And so when I got to be 15, I tell my parents I want to get my pilot's license and start flying. You can solo at 16, get your student license. And they go, well, you better get a job. And I tried to get a job in the men's clothing store where all the kids hung out after school. They said, you're too young. I tried to get the high-paying job in town, which was bagging groceries at the Piggly Wiggly. No jobs. And I walked in this little radio station, a daytimer, went off the air when the sun went down. And there was an old guy named Bill Jones who owned it. He was there. And I said, I would like a job. He said, well, do you have a good grades? And I go, yeah, pretty good grades. He said, do you get in trouble? I'm not really. He goes, well, come in this room. And he put a reel tape on, turned it on, microphone. He ripped some wire copy of the news and said, read this. And I read it. He came back in a minute, listened to it, and goes, that's good enough. go to New Orleans, get your third-class radio telephone operator's license, which means I could control the transmitter, and you're hired. And so I began doing weekend work there at 15, and then later went to the other radio station and was after school from 3 to 6 every day.
Spin records too?
Oh, yeah, we were at a music station, so we were playing it. And by the way, you also did stuff like Swap Shop of the Air and the Trading Post and,
great.
all little town radio stuff. And so that got me money to pay for flying lessons. Well, I probably wasn't attracted necessarily to the stations I was on there, but there was a underground radio station, Jackson, Mississippi, the 102.9 Stereo Rock, JDX FM, had this booming signal, went all the way from New Orleans to Memphis. And every kid listened to this
What'd they
station.
play?
It was like, well, back then it was underground, which was, by the way, Dr. John the Night Tripper or Fleetwood Mac or Steve Miller Band, which were not popular yet. Obviously Doors, etc. But we would play a track from the album, and we'd put the album away. You couldn't play anything else on the album for another day. The more obscure, the better. And that was a tasty track from Dr. John the Night Tripper. And before that, you sort of picture people with a tie-dye parachute hanging on their ceiling, smoking a lot of weed kind of station. So I always said, I want to work at that station.
68, 69, what year is this?
This was 69.
69.
70. So I drove up there one day. And I said, I want to meet the program director of the radio station. It was actually an AM station. It was very straight and a part of a TV station, but they had this freaky FM. And so the guy comes out, a guy named Bill Tanner, and I say, I want to work, blah, blah, blah. He said, what do you do? He says, let me hear your tape. And he goes, tell you what I'll let you do. I'll let you work Sunday mornings, which is like the worst shift in the world. You're paid some paid programming on, then you get to play a little music. And so I got the job on Sunday morning.
On your favorite station?
On my favorite station.
That's great.
And so I worked Monday through Friday and down in Brookhaven. And on Sunday, I would drive up and do this.
How long of a drive is that?
Hour. And when I started college the next year, everybody knew me. But
From
from
the
just
radio.
this one little shift. And suddenly I'm like, I'm getting caught up into it. And then I got interested in really commercial radio. And like Boss Radio, KHJ in Los Angeles, and the Drake sound, and there's something else here. So I got hired by the Top 40 station, and I did 7 to midnight on the Top 40 station.
Where was that?
In Jackson, Mississippi, 1971. And I'm wildly ambitious. So I make all these air checks, recordings of my show, and send them out. No internet, no easy ways. I mail them off to all the program directors, all the radio stations I could find. If I could find their name, I typed a letter, sent them. After my freshman year in college, that summer, I was hired at WRIT in Milwaukee, Top 40, and I was going to play do summer relief for everybody going on vacation. But as soon as I got there, a guy got hired to go to Chicago, so they gave me the midday show.
Wow.
I'm like a 18-year-old kid. What do I know about the housewife shift, the
Amazing.
midday shift?
Yeah.
And there were people there who worked all over the country. And I began to, as you know, from your industry and this industry, learn about it. And the competing station in Milwaukee had a station in Detroit. They were just putting on the air an FM station. And one of the guys that had been on the air in WOKY, a competitor, is hired as program director in Detroit. I sent him a note saying, hey, congratulations. If you ever have any jobs, let me know. And he goes, I do. You want to come? And so I went out and did 10 at night till 2 in the morning. And to drive the Q truck, the prize truck. So you drive behind the car, license plate H1, pull over. Could you imagine doing this thing? Pull over and you'll get a T-shirt.
Unbelievable.
And so that began my sort of really nomadic life. I stayed there a year, went to college at Oakland University. And one of the guys there got offered a job in Pittsburgh. He said, I don't want to go to Pittsburgh. You interested? And I go, I don't know, maybe. So I talked to the guy who was going down there, station manager, leaving a station in Detroit to go there. And I drive down with him to Pittsburgh. I'm 19 years old, mind you. On the way to Pittsburgh, I convince him I should program the radio station. I mean, how the hell do I, I've been a student. I've been listening to everybody. I think I know everything in the world. I think I'm a genius now.
Yeah.
And he agrees. They let me program the radio station. I go to Pittsburgh.
But there's something about that enthusiasm.
I don't know what it is, but they let me program the station. And I had this sort of quirky idea of what we should do with the station.
What was the idea?
Well, the greatest program director in my mind of my time was a guy named Buzz Bennett. I don't know if you remember Buzzy. Buzz had worked for Drake. That was the big programmer at the time, and they had all these Drake stations, RKO stations. And Buzzy was a success there. And Buzzy had gone across the street on another station in San Diego and beat Drake. And he's the first guy to ever beat Drake. And then he's the hottest programmer. He comes to town and puts the station on the air for Cecil Heftal called 13Q. And they simulcast it originally on AM and FM. And in those days, AM was much bigger than FM. FM wasn't, didn't have full penetration of cars, et cetera. And they did really well, number one out of the box. And then they took the FM and turned it to beautiful music. So I say, they just did that. Why don't we make ourselves sound like 13Q's FM again and get people to think, because the FM had almost as much audience as the AM, why don't we sound like we're 13Q? So 13Q did the great ripoff. We did the great zip-off. We did whatever they did. We would just do it. Whatever music they play, we would play. And we're just going to ride their coattails. And I think most people would be humiliated to do that. I wasn't. I just wanted to win. And we actually beat them in the ratings.
Wow,
And-
doing their thing.
Yeah, right.
How do you think it works so you could beat someone doing their thing?
You know what? I think it was because, well, I understood their thing and agreed with their thing and liked their thing.
Yeah.
So I was totally into it.
Yeah.
Wish I thought of it.
Yeah.
And FM was just coming on too. Just
Timing had something to do with
of
it
course,
too.
always, doesn't
Yeah.
it? So I had that big success as this 19-year-old kid, and suddenly people from the country noticed me. And I was at that stage where they go, "Yeah, but you're too young." And the general manager there, guy named Charlie Warner, had been a part of Bill Paley's CBS, had run their CBS radio rep firm, looked great, St. Albans, Dartmouth, wore the right suits, handsome, said
And
everything.
Huge company.
At CBS he was, but he got fired at CBS. The only job he could find at that time was in Pittsburgh as the general manager. So he came there and he became infatuated with me. He just loved the idea that I was 19. And by the way, I had a beard and had long hair and wore a T-shirt. I wasn't playing the game. He just thought that was fabulous. Just, poking the bear in the eye.
Yeah.
And he got fired in Pittsburgh, but got hired at NBC in Chicago. So he calls me up and goes, "You want to come to Chicago?" And I'm 20 years old. And somehow I got to NBC in Chicago when I was 20 and making more money than I ever dreamed. I'd make like 5 or 6 times the money my dad made. And I think back on my career now and say, going from NBC to MTV, that's all probable. The improbable jump is to go from a small town in Mississippi 5 years later to be the afternoon guy and programming the big NBC Clear Channel station in Chicago. And it was all because we talked about giving people a chance.
Yeah.
Charlie Warner was willing to take a chance on a 20-year-old kid to replace the 47-year-old programmer who was there to program this station. And I think today, if somebody came to me and said, "We're going to hire this 20-year-old guy, we're going to give him our biggest station," I'd go, "No, we're not.
Crazy?
Are you crazy? That's insane."
Yeah.
How he managed to pull it off, I don't know. Probably part of it was a day of not great information flow. So he probably had a lot of choices he could make in Chicago that nobody at corporate knew about. Today, we know everything everybody's doing.
Yeah.
But he made that decision. And then he and I went to WNBC together too. And was just like, there are a couple of people who changed your life. And yes, I was capable, obviously, as it turns out. But you mentioned luck earlier.
Yeah.
But it's like luck. It's just like right place, right time.
So you went to WNBC in New York.
We had a big success with the AM in Chicago, changed it to country music, which I knew nothing about. But I was one of those guys who was beginning to do research. In college, I majored in social methods and sociology and research. And there was a group of us beginning to say, "Hey,
How do you do research in the 1980s? There's
we
no
did-
internet yet.
we did survey research, which no one had ever done. They used to call the record store and say, "What's selling?" And of course, the record company said, "I'll give you 10 extra albums to say my record's selling well." So it was, by the way, I'm not sure if it was accurate about record sales.
Yeah.
And as you know, record sales don't necessarily correlate to what people want to hear on the radio.
No.
So we started this thing where we call people. It's just random. Back in those days, you could call anybody you wanted to. We'd go to the phone book and just randomly call people and ask them to join a panel to talk about music each week. And we would play little hooks of songs down the line to people and say, "Have you ever heard of this song? If you've heard of it, is it your favorite? I like it, but not my favorite. I like it, but tired of hearing it. I'm sort of neutral. I dislike it, or I dislike it so much, I change the channel when it comes on."
Good question.
So now we
Yeah.
were we would every week we'd say, okay, well, this one's number one with the top category. This one's the one they hate the most. Over the years, we figured out I like it, but tired of hearing it so much, runs people off more than anything else. But we were able to develop it. So we built a playlist based on a random sample of listeners. So we're really talking to them to find out what they wanted. So I used that for the country music because I didn't know country music at all. And we became the number one country station in America almost overnight.
Wow.
And then I did it on the FM.
Was anyone else using data yet in radio?
There was a small group of us, and we all traded notes. There was a guy named Todd Wallace and Steve Casey, who eventually the music director at MTV when I was there. And we were all saying, I'm learning this, I'm learning that. How are you doing this? How do you get the people on the call? How do you get it so quick? What system do you use? And so we were regularly talking. And we were sort of the new Turks, the new kids. Nobody liked us. We were ruining the music business, but they gave me an edge. And I did the FM station and beat the ABC FM, which at that time they were doing sort of album-oriented radio. Lee Abrams had been there, if you know Lee, and that was where he made his mark. And we beat the ABC FM. We were the first ones to ever beat an ABC FM. So then they said, okay, kid, come to New York. And
Unbelievable.
at age 23, I went there to program WNBC. I had Don Imus in the morning and
Incredible.
all these big names. And so that was my big shot to get there.
Amazing. Also interesting to have those similar-minded people around the country who were sharing notes on the same things, which in most industries, people look at those as competitors, even if they're not direct competitors, but there's that sense of competition. You don't talk to those people. They're your enemies. But you saw that it was like a revolution.
It was a revolution. The camaraderie always works. Every place I go, camaraderie is really important. I mean, even when we started MTV, that original group of people, we went to dinner together every night. We went on vacation together. We shared summer houses together.
Yeah.
We lived together. It was communal and it was collegial. And, you know, I'm a believer that nobody wins, teams win.
Yeah. Tell me about WNBC.
Well, WNBC was...
it's the biggest radio station in New York?
WABC was the biggest.
ABC was
and
biggest.
WNBC was the also ran. And they couldn't quite get over the hump. Part of the problem was what I would do at each station I'd gone to, I would do some survey research to people who were listening to like WABC. What do you like about the station? What don't you like about it? Then we'd go in the air position. It would be whatever they said they liked. And we'd say, and we don't have the whatever they said they didn't like.
Yeah.
And then we'd talk about the other station on the air and taunt them so much they begin to change stuff. It had worked for me. So I sort of tried that, and WABC was oblivious. They didn't change anything. By the way, the sound hadn't changed since the mid-1960s. I was so out of date, so wrong. But, you know, I learned something, which was people have habits.
Yeah.
Don't screw with this. Like, you know, the people who take that magazine and go, I can make it look better. I'm going to do a magazine redesign. They kill the magazine.
Yeah.
Because good or bad, you're accustomed to it. That's what you know it as. And they wouldn't change. And finally, I think it was WBLS or WKTU came on the air. By the way, we were running behind them. It couldn't quite get them. And
was
then
it disco at that time or past disco?
I think it was disco that came on the air, and they had a big rating. And WABC freaked out. They fired the programmer. They brought a guy in who made the station sound really new and modern, and the ratings died. We surged ahead, and that's the way WNBC became number one.
Amazing. And then how many years did you do that?
I did that 3 years, and Herb Schlosser.
Were you on air as well or no?
New York was the first place I wasn't regularly on the air, but I would do fill-in. And if somebody went on vacation, I'd do a week shift. I was the guy that if Don Imus didn't come in the morning, which unfortunately happened some, I'd get a call about 5:30 and say, Don's not coming in. I go, okay, give me a minute. I'll stay on the air till I get there. And we'd go do the shift.
If you got that call, would you be bummed or would you be excited?
Okay. I mean, you know, the problem was if I was out till midnight, I wasn't planning on getting up at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
So that was the bad part of it. But
but in general, it was fun to be on the air for you still?
Yeah, it was always fun. I was never great on the air. I'm too controlled. I have that switch which says, oh, I shouldn't do that. The greatest people on the air are the people who just let go.
So tell me about the format of WNBC.
It was top 40. I mean, CHR, play the hits, but heavy personality. We had Imus in the morning. When I got there, Don was like way off the reservation. We fired Don. Don couldn't get a job in New York, wound up back in Cleveland where he'd come from. And about a year later, somebody said, Don's cleaned up his act. You ought to go hear him. So I actually, in those days, no internet or anything. I fly to Cleveland. I sit at the airport, have a radio. I turn it on and listen to his show. And they're right. He's really good.
He's back.
He's back.
Yeah.
So I come back and we hire him back to the morning show. And obviously he was spectacular and talented. And right after I left, they hired Howard Stern to do the afternoon show. They had Soupy Sales at midday. That was a little right after my time, but it was about personalities. Again, I think back then I sort of discovered that what radio really is, it's a companion to people. As soon as you could get cassette recordings and 8 tracks, etc., I no longer had to listen to radio for the music. If I just wanted music, I got to other places to go. No commercials, exactly what I want. But you realize that companionship's critical. Today, probably more than ever, which is
So
something.
you say that a playlist can't replace listening to radio for that period of time.
You know what? It's a different experience.
Yeah.
Actually, if you ask people, do you listen to a playlist and your music collection and radio, they agree with the statement. I listen to them both, but at different times for different reasons. And you'll see always if somebody had a CD on, you'd see them listening to it, and then for some reason they just turn on the radio. Why'd they do that? It's in the middle of a song.
Yeah.
They can't be away from people. I mean, it's a different experience. On the radio, I know what's going on in the world. It's a camaraderie of people. It's a gang of people. We always make it sound like there are a lot of people listening. We have listeners calling in, put them on the air.
Sense of community.
A sense of community. And they're listening for companionship. It's interesting. The average person watches about 30 different TV networks in a month. The average person listens to 2 radio stations.
Wow.
I ride to work with Ryan Seacrest every morning. I have for 20 years. I'm going to listen to him until he's no longer there.
Yeah.
He's my buddy.
Yeah.
I know everything about him. I keep track of him. He's talking about stuff relevant to me. I'm not going to go anywhere else. People say, oh, my commercials come on. Everybody leaves commercials. Actually, in radio, they don't, not like TV, they don't leave on the commercial break. They leave on a song they don't like. On the commercial break, the commercials are sort of talking about stuff you need for your life. The same thing that, what's Ryan talking about? He's talking about people and clothes and cars and food and movies and TV shows. Same thing the commercials are talking about. So it is this sense of like, I'm with you. I'm going to hang out with you. But I learned that sort of way back there at WNBC. And I was doing really well there, loved it, and was preparing to go be a TV programmer because Herb Schlosser said, you're in. I did the TV show after Saturday Night, got sort of beginning to learn TV. And then Herb got kicked out, and they brought a guy named Fred Silverman in, and suddenly I was not special anymore. And there was a group of us that we were actually called sort of, sexist in those days of Herb's boys. And it was a bunch of guys that Herb loved, and it didn't matter what your boss said, you could call Herb, and Herb would overrule him. Lord Michaels, who was doing Saturday Night Live, Dick Ebersol was doing late night. I think Don Ohlmeyer was doing sports. Brandon Tartikoff may have been there by then, and me. And so when he got kicked out, it's like all of Herb's boys were in trouble. That's when Lorne left Saturday Night Live. Dick Ebersol left.
Yeah.
Ohlmeyer went to Nabisco. Everybody left. And so I'm like open to the idea of like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do now. Had my life planned out. Everything was going to happen the right way.
Yeah.
It's like plans don't come true. And I got a call from these folks saying, we're doing this cable programming company. We think the world's going to be narrowcast TV channels like I was describing to you. And, you have radio experience, so we think we like radio. Think you'd be good. Why don't you come over? And so, it was a long process to get hired because some of the people there going, how can you hire this kid? How can you hire this kid with no TV experience? How can you hire this kid? And in the end, they gave me a shot. And originally did the movie channel and then
Movie
MTV.
Channel worked.
Yeah, movie channel worked, then MTV. And we took Nickelodeon, which had been a preschoolers channel, which the cable company had been using to get cable franchises by saying, hey, look at all the do-good stuff we do, and changed it to a tween channel, which Nickelodeon took off and just roared.
And was the idea that there's this thing, Disney, and it's its own thing, and why don't we compete with Disney?
Yeah, we thought Disney was old looking. It wasn't cool.
And it was at that time.
It was at that time. And so Nickelodeon was like cool and hip, irreverent, sassy. It sounded in tune. And we had a same on-air look. Got him Fred Seibert, did MTV. I got Fred. We worked on it, did the Nickelodeon on-air look with Jerry Laybourne, who had been in programming at Nickelodeon, and I gave her the shot to run the whole thing. And Fred and Jerry worked on this whole look again. So MTV was about mood and emotion.
Hmm.
Very few TV networks at the time did anybody care about. They cared about the shows.
Yep.
Like, so I'm watching whatever show. They go, what networks that on? I go, I don't know. It's like my favorite show. And the networks were nothing more than delivery systems for shows.
Hmm.
MTV was the first network where people say, I'm tuning in to watch MTV, see what's on. They're going to MTV, not a program.
Yeah.
And Nickelodeon began to, I'm going to turn on Nickelodeon. What's on? I don't know. I'm going to Nickelodeon. That the network became the object of desire. And that sort of changed how people did TV networks. And after us, other people had success with that as well.
I remember also in the I Want My MTV campaign, you had huge rock stars doing commercials saying, I want my MTV. People who you could never hire to do a commercial for anything, for any amount.
I know. It was crazy. I mean, John Sykes talks about the idea we want to get the Who. So he camps out at Bill Kerbush's office in London, and he gets across the street. He's got a setup of a camera and all, and he's just waiting. And he sees Pete Townsend come.
Guerrilla style.
And he goes, hey, I need you to help with them. And he goes, Pete looks a little befuddled, and he walks across the street with him and records, I Want My MTV.
Unbelievable.
Didn't know what he was.
Unbelievable.
And I think 7 or 8 months later, we do something with the Who. They're on the air or something. And Sykes sees him and goes up to him thinking, hey, I'm your buddy. And he looks at him and goes, you're the one. And it felt like he'd been railroaded into it. But we had Mick Jagger, we had Madonna. Now, Madonna was a new act then. So David Bowie, etc. The Police, who were like,
do you think if not for
band.
MTV, we would know who Madonna is today?
Boy, that's a great point. I think the biggest impact MTV had on the music business is we turned performers into celebrities.
Yeah.
One of the first things we heard was people say, wow, I'm being stopped on the street and people saying, I saw you on MTV. They didn't stop many musicians back then because you didn't know what they looked like.
And many musicians had trouble making the flip. It was like when sound came in and for actors, similar.
Right. I mean, and there was some of them fought it, didn't want it, took Bruce Springsteen a long time to do a video. And some people like Madonna just knew it. I mean, she was one of the first MTV artists.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson just got it, understood it. And
Billy Idol,
Prince. Oh my God. It was just like, and they were lining up there. But I'm not sure would have been the stars they were they not the MTV stars. And it was sort of interesting to watch. I mean, we're in the middle of that revolution as well. But you think about what happened to the music business after those people became celebrities. Suddenly, the touring business is bigger. Suddenly, endorsements are big. Suddenly, they have enormous sort of personal power as a celebrity.
It changed a lot.
Yeah.
So much of today's life happens on the web. Squarespace is your home base for building your dream presence in an online world. Designing a website is easy using one of Squarespace's best-in-class templates. With the built-in style kit, you can change fonts, imagery, margins, and menus, so your design will be perfectly tailored to your needs. Discover unbreakable creativity with Fluid Engine, a highly intuitive drag-and-drop editor. No coding or technical experience is required. Understand your site's performance with in-depth website analytics tools. Squarespace has everything you need to succeed online. Create a blog, monetize a newsletter, make a marketing portfolio, launch an online store. The Squarespace app helps you run your business from anywhere. Track inventory and connect with customers while you're on the go. Whether you're just starting out or already managing a successful brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create and customize a beautiful website. Visit squarespace.com/Tetra and get started today.
What were some of the things that happened along the way at MTV that was like, couldn't believe this is happening?
Well, becoming profitable there was a guy named Drew Lewis who had been Reagan's Secretary of Transportation. He had famously fired all the air traffic controllers, if you recall this.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, tough guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Warner Amex was two things. It was a programming company, Warner Amex Satellite Entertainment Company, which is where MTV was, and it's Warner Amex Cable. In the cable business, in the early 80s, they made all sorts of promises to cities to get the cable franchise, to build out the big cities. The problem was, as usually happens, is people had made very uneconomic deals. And so it was crushing Warner Amex, these deals they had done. So they hired Drew Lewis to come in and fix it. Drew's just a tough nut, knows nothing.
Just bottom line,
Bottom
basically.
line. And Drew, it turns out, I had one of the meetings with him, and I was talking about something we were doing with the Rolling Stones. And one of the people that worked for Drew goes, Drew, do you know who the Rolling Stones are? And he goes, no. You ever heard of Mick Jagger? No. And I go, boy, I am in deep shit. Drew takes me to lunch and says, okay, Bob, look, and it's a complicated drama, but they don't like your boss, Jack Schneider. They're going to fire Jack Schneider eventually, and I need you to get ready to be that. And then he goes, but the first thing I need you to do is MTV's got to be profitable. Said, if you can't make it profitable by the end of the year, I'm going to shut it down. And the board of directors a couple of times had said, we're going to shut MTV down. Steve Ross had saved it. And now he's saying, we're going to shut it down. This guy's got the power to do it. So I came back for that meeting and go, I can't tell everybody that works for me that we're at risk of being shut down. So I just have to sort of suck it up, but I have to do something rather dramatic. So we cut costs like crazy. I mean, if you hear people from the early days of Creative, I think they're going to say, oh yeah, I remember working. Bob, he's so creative. They'll say Bob was the cheapest son of a bitch I ever worked with in my life because mine was find every penny I could everywhere.
And you had to.
Survival, but I couldn't tell anybody because it would bum them all out. So, I mean, we're riding high. The press is writing about us. Everybody loves us. The cable operators were getting it for free. And we decided, you know what? We need them to pay us. If they don't pay us, we pencil out, we're never going to be profitable. So we go back and we do these fights with the cable companies saying, I know we said it's free, you got to charge for it. And in that time, a couple of the big cable operators trying to get leverage on us convinced Ted Turner to start the cable music channel to compete with MTV. And so they come out with the cable music channel. I remember I had learned on the movie channel when HBO came out with Cinemax, I learned what a fighting brand was. I only had to learn that one time.
Yeah.
So when Turner came out with the cable music channel, I started VH1. And instead of him being able to compete with cable music channel versus MTV, I wanted to be the cable music channel versus VH1.
Yeah.
And if it had to kill VH1, fine, who cares?
Yeah.
It keeps MTV out of the fight.
Yeah.
So Turner said, well, we're free to the cable industry. I go, VH1's free too. And then it goes, okay, well, we're going to sell spots cheaper to the advertisers. They're going to be $90 instead of the $300 you charge. They go, ours will be $80. So whatever they did, we just undercut it. And after 34 days, he shuts down.
34 days.
34 days, he shuts down the cable music channel, VH1, which we just did. They cost us $5 million.
Yeah.
Incremental. That's the whole cost of doing VH1 was $5 million.
Yeah.
We literally had a closet where we had some VJs in a closet with a fixed focus camera and a 3/4 inch machine, just cheap stuff. But we said, look, let's keep it going. And as you know, VH1 continued on. And
forgetting the cost of making the content for the channel, how hard was it to get access on a cable channel? How many channels are there?
It was hard back then. It was really hard. And we didn't get MTV on in Manhattan for about the first 3 years on Manhattan.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, it was a long time.
Yeah.
And it was more rural America where everybody had cable, sort of then drifting up to the big cities.
Which is interesting also because it was very cutting edge programming.
Right.
It was modern programming. It was not Des Moines.
Scared the cable operators. When VH1 came, I go, okay, I have no money. How am I going to get any distribution? I hire all the famous disc jockeys in New York. Scott Shannon, Don Imus, Frankie Crocker, all are on VH1. And I go, I'm going to get on in New York. Don Imus goes on the air. We were going to launch, I think it was January 1st. He's on the air saying, well, Jack Galt, the guy who ran Manhattan Cable, was going to put us on, said, we're going to be right there, VH1. Jack Galt calls me and goes, what the hell are you doing? Said, we're not putting you on. And I go, do you want me to tell Don that? And he goes, no, don't tell him that. And we launched on Manhattan Cable.
Unbelievable.
So it was not I Want My MTV, but it was another sort of pressure tactic to get these
Wow.
guys to carry us.
Amazing. And then how big did MTV grow?
Well, you know what TV.
And when did you leave?
I left. We tried to do a management buyout. American Express decided they wanted to get out of the Warner MX venture, and there was a shotgun buy sell with Warner, so it was up for grabs. So David Horowitz, who had been the president of Warner's, had come down to MTV to be the CEO when we went public because they said I was too young.
Is
So
it the first time you went public with something?
it was,
And how was that experience?
it was great. I mean, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And by the way, the day we were pricing the public offering
Yes.
is the day Ted Turner announced he was starting a competing service.
Mm.
So the stock goes woof. We almost didn't come out, but Shearson Lehman was taking us public, owned by American Express. They owned half of us, so we got out public. But we were under the cloud of, oh my God, Ted Turner, he'll kill you. He's Mr. Cable.
Yeah.
What do these kids know? How can they beat
But
Ted
not
Turner?
34 days.
Yeah, right. They're going to kill him. So we got out public. And then obviously after Turner went away, the stock goes up. And so David Horowitz had come down to be the CEO because they said I was too young to be the CEO of a public company. And they said, well, we'll let you be CEO in 2 years, but David's going to come down for 2 years. So David and I are very close. He had been Steve's president of Warner's. And David and I set about to do a managed buyout. We interviewed a bunch of people. Forsman Little, who was very big at the time, Teddy Forsman, Nick Forsman, Brian Little. They'd come in. We put together an offer. And Steve had decided that what he was going to do is sell half of everything to Viacom. And that's the way he was going to buy out American Express. He called me and said, look, I want you to go with this new thing and we're going to do blah, blah. I said, well, Steve, I'll do it, but only if you'll meet with Teddy Forsman first and hear us. And he goes, okay, I'll do that. And Teddy gave him a big pitch, a lot of money for MTV, more than he ever thought he could make. And so he decides he'll sell it to us. And so we're going, my God, Fat City, I'm going to own the company. We're going to be it. And Teddy was a tough character. Steve was a constant negotiator. We had an agreement, and Steve kept retrading and retrading and retrading. And finally, Teddy tells the investment banker, you can tell Steve he can go fuck himself. And by the way, no investment banker should ever go tell the client someone said that. And the investment banker told Steve that. And so Steve goes, oh, really? So he sends word over to Viacom. Viacom comes in with a competing offer.
Yeah.
And they wound up buying
Unbelievable.
MTV. This was 1985. I sort of lost my dream, but I had 1% of MTV. And that was more money. I didn't have any money. Suddenly I've got like millions of dollars.
Yeah.
By today's standards, I got screwed.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, maybe not such a bad thing that we got it. I signed a new 5-year deal with Viacom. But as things go on, obviously people are now coming to me saying, hey, you want to come here or do whatever. And it just bothered me that somebody had my company.
Yeah.
I left in 87. I went to MCA, came to me with a deal. Lou and Sid came and offered me a deal that Irving actually set up, who was running the music company in MCA at the time, that they would finance a 50-50 joint venture. I could go do whatever I wanted to do.
Great.
And I go, great.
Yeah.
And so I left, and I made sure Freston, who was my deputy at the time and a good friend, got the shot to be the president.
Do you think if MTV continued with its original format of showing videos and having VJs, it may still be relevant today?
Which is a great question. Probably. I mean, we did some shows as sort of spice and some little anchors, but I would probably never have done the narrative form on MTV.
It felt like instead of being MTV, they were being regular television.
But they had the youth audience, they had the attitude, and they wound up being wildly successful.
For a window of time.
For a period of time. And as I say, I wouldn't have had the guts to do it because I had a vision, and so I could not see the other thing. And I think, as happens with businesses, the other group came in and said, okay, we'd still be music. Slowly but surely it became more and more programs because it didn't start out instantly. It was...
No, but there was a time when if you turned on MTV, you were not going to see music most of the time.
Right. And you know what's interesting? I think when Tom and Judy were really running it, they kept their hand in music enough to hang on to all of that imagery and that audience, and they put out enough music shows. I think when Tom left, Judy left, Philippe Damone running it, I think they just turned it into, it's just a network.
Yeah.
And it lost its mojo.
Yeah.
What made MTV so popular was the attitude. It
Mhm.
just like, it was just cool.
Yeah.
And we do shit to just make us seem cool.
And it felt like counter programming and
Right.
didn't feel like everything else.
Right.
It really was. There was everything and there was MTV.
The original name that we wanted for MTV, my concept was TV1. And we're going to do TV a different way. And this is TV1. We couldn't clear TV1. So then we figured out we could clear TVM. So it's going to be TVM. And actually one of Steve Case, who was the driest, sort of most analytical guy in the bunch, who was the music director, which is the analytical job, in a meeting, it's very dry, he says, don't you think MTV sounds better than TVM? I go, yeah, it does. Okay. And that
like
second,
that.
it became MTV.
Just like
No
that.
study, no,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
it was just like, yeah, okay, it's going to be MTV.
Yeah. Tell me more about Steve Ross.
Steve Ross is an amazing guy. Steve was a guy who, I often talk about in business, it's math and magic that you need.
You have a podcast called Math
and Magic. It's, to me, it's always been my thing. By the way, Buzzy Bennett said that. I thought was the greatest program ever.
Yeah.
Said it's the analytics, but it's also you got to have the magic.
Yeah.
I can do all this survey data and tell you what people want. That to make it exciting.
No.
I now have to have the magic to make it exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's true with every business, every project is the math and magic. So Steve Ross had an interesting blend of that. He had unbelievable financial skills, just saw deals and numbers and understood it. But he also really appreciated the magic. And although he may not have been able to create it, he loved the people who could
And supported it.
and supported it
Yeah.
and worshiped it. And those were stars to him, not people to be tolerated, but those were people to be worshiped.
Yeah.
And I learned so much from Steve. Steve was the first guy I'd ever heard say something like this. He'd say, you know, Bob, you're never going to be fired here for making a mistake. You're going to be fired here for not making a mistake. Because if you're not making a mistake, it tells me you're not trying anything new, and whatever we've given you to manage is going to wilt away under your management.
Yeah.
You know, and he didn't say this, but I've added to it, and
Yeah.
I'm sure he implied it, is that mistakes are the byproduct of innovation. If you're going to try
Absolutely.
new shit, at least half of it's not going to work.
Absolutely.
And when we get ready to try something, I go, guys, don't get too carried away. 50-50 chance it works.
Yeah.
So let's
But if
just
you
keep
don't try it,
right.
nothing changes.
The corollary that goes with that is you have to have a bias toward quick decision making.
Mm-hmm.
Because when it invariably is wrong, change it.
Yeah.
Change it quickly,
Yeah,
but
right
don't
away.
sit there and study
34
and review.
days.
Yeah, it's like quick, move.
Yeah.
And I learned that from Steve. And I learned to be bold. It's just like, who cares what people think? And Steve was an outsider. I mean, he was this group of guys sort of, you know, out of Brooklyn who were
Parking lot business
parking
originally.
lot, you know, office management, cleaning services. And Steve had started with his father-in-law's 2 funeral homes and was a funeral director and just had an entrepreneurial eye. And he goes, wait, what are we doing with all these limousines at night? Nothing. Let's start renting them out. So they rented out the great limousine service. And then they go, well, where are we parking them? That parking garage. Why don't we buy the parking garage? And then that'll be better. And then he goes, wait a minute. We got a parking garage. And at this time, the rental car business was beginning to be developed. He said, let's start a rental car company and they can park in any of the parking lots in New York for free. And that'll be our special thing.
Great
And you can
idea.
rent them at the parking lots.
Amazing.
And so he just kept seeing one thing after another. And then he did a study about what businesses he should be in. And the entertainment business came up high. So he said, we're going to get in the entertainment business. He bought Ashley Famous, the talent agency, with Ted Ashley, Spencer Harrison, and David Geffen had been working there as the music guy. And then he had an opportunity to buy this bankrupt company called Warner 7 Arts. And they had to get rid of the talent agency because of the consent decrees about what the studios can own. And they wound up with Warner's. And he bought it with the thought of the movie company, but they discovered that all the money was being made with the record companies. And they had 1 billion little independent distributors. One of the great ideas was create WIA, one distribution organization, give them extra clout. And, you know, Ahmed was running Atlantic.
Yeah.
And,
Mo was running Warner's.
And Joe Smith was working with him as the president of Warner's. And I think David was running Electra Asylum at the time. so that was off it went. But I just loved Steve because Steve would just encourage you to go take a big chance. Go, go. Oh, I love what you're doing. It's not like not critical, but he was a deal guy and just understood it. And if you weren't bothered by sort of the Brooklyn culture, like rough and tough,
Yeah.
I mean, I was in a meeting and my then boss, who had been at CBS, a very straight-laced guy and very sort of CBS proper, said something in a meeting, and Steve looked at him and goes, "What do you have, a death wish?" Saying, basically, that's a stupid idea.
Yeah.
He was so offended. He couldn't even finish the
He
my
took
boss.
it as a threat.
And Steve didn't mean it. It's just
No.
like the way they talk.
Of course.
And so I sort of learned that way. And that's okay. I mean, I'm sort of even keel, and it's fine. It's like everybody's bantering back and forth.
Yeah.
And Steve always said, in search of the breakthrough idea.
Yeah. How much time did you get to spend with him?
A lot.
Tell
a
me.
lot. Steve would call me a lot and say, "Hey, we got a meeting with so-and-so, come on up." He would call me at the
For
end
things that were not part of your...
nothing. He would call, he had a deal guy named Ed Abudi, who he worked closely with. And he would call me and like 4 or 5 o'clock, I get a call from his office, say, "Hey, Mr. Ross wants to see you." And I go up and Steve said, "I'm thinking about doing this." He was always like, "I'm thinking about some idea." And I'd start ideating with him. And he loved that. And then he'd say, "Get a booty, call a booty, get him in here." And, this days before cell phones or anything. And
Yeah.
I was supposed to have dinner with my wife. It's like 8 o'clock. I say, "Excuse me a minute, I'm not coming to dinner." And I'd be there till 11 o'clock with just Steve brainstorming and thinking. And I sort of turned out to be sort of a sounding board for him. And when we sold the company to Viacom, he said, "Look, you got to go with the company. You're part of the deal and blah, blah, blah." And when I left to go to MCA, he calls me and goes, "What are you doing? Why didn't you come back here?" And I go, I thought I was part of the deal." And he goes, "Ah." And so for 2 years, he kept trying to get me to come back. And finally, I bought my way out of the MCA deal and went back to Warner, went back to Steve. And we were just doing the Time Warner merger. He hired me, didn't tell me we were merging with Time. I agree. I'm coming. He said, "Okay, now I got to tell you something. We're going to merge with Time." And
Once you agreed to come back,
and
then he tells you that's the plan.
and he said, "What I want you to..."
What were your thoughts about that?
I was sort of game for anything. And
Yeah.
the way he pitched me was, he goes, "Listen, Bob, I need a successor. I want you to come back and be my successor," which like very heady stuff for me. I'm in my 30s. And
How old was he at the time, would you say?
Steve must have been late 50s, early 60s. And I was like, "Wow, what do you mean?" And so then when we were going to merge the companies, well, I was going to come back to Warner and be in the office of the president. We were going to have 3 of us that were the office of the president under him, which sounded pretty great because he never had one president. He had like 3 guys. And I was going to be in that. Then he said, "Okay,
So you would be part of everything.
right." And so then it goes, "Okay, we're going to merge with Time, but we're going to keep it separate. So we're still going to have an office of the president of Warner's and then the Time assets." And then he calls me and said, "Okay, we're not going to do that." And so I go, "Fine." And so I wound up with being the head of basically new business, Time Warner Enterprises. And I had wanted to buy Six Flags theme parks, which was really sort of my burning desire when I came back.
Why did you want to do that?
I don't know. When I was at MCA and we could buy companies was the whole idea. We tried to buy an ad agency, tried to buy J. Walter Thompson, wound up with about 5% of the equity of J. Walter Thompson. And we were going to make a hostile bid. And then a guy named Martin Sorrell shows up to also make a hostile bid. We briefly talk about doing something together. Martin knew they had Tokyo real estate. I didn't know that. It was worth about half the value of J. Walter Thompson.
Wow.
And so he bid more than we were willing to bid.
Yeah.
But the stock had gone up so much. I mean, a quick win. I mean, we bought 5% of the company and suddenly we tripled our money. And, the MCA guys go, "Hey, I like you." So I'm going out saying, "What other companies can we look at?" And I found Six Flags. It was owned by Wesray Capital, sort of a busted LBO.
Were they the original owners?
No, they had bought
They
it.
bought it.
Yeah, and
And how many were there? How many Six Flags
there were
were
only 7 at the time, only in big cities, big parks. And I go to the MCA guys, "I want to buy this." They go, "We already have theme parks." I go, "But I thought my deal was I could buy anything."
Yeah.
And they go, "But not that." And so I'm talking to Steve, who was calling me pretty regularly, saying, "Hey, well, you should come back," and blah, blah, blah. And I tell him about Six Flags, and he said, "If you come back, I'll let you buy Six Flags." So this was sort of the deal. So when we were sort of divvying up responsibility, I said, look, let me buy Six Flags. I'll run that. And I'll run all the other new business. We'll go find new businesses and put everything there.
Yeah.
And which sounded pretty exciting to me.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
kind of like what you would have done at MCA if they let you do whatever you want, really.
Right. Well, what's interesting, and this is again luck, as luck would turn out, you know this, in companies back then that pay you great money, but you didn't get any equity.
Yeah.
So when we got ready to do the deal, in the Time and Warner deal, they had to borrow a lot of money, heavily loaded up on debt. And Steve goes, look, I can give you $50 million to buy it, but you got to go find somebody else with the other $100 million of equity. And oh, by the way, cap them so they can't earn more than a 30% IRR. And we got to be able to buy them back. And I'm like, all these conditions.
Yeah.
And I go, okay.
Yeah.
And I wound up getting Blackstone.
Wow.
Steve Schwarzman, at the time Henry Silverman was running and Roger Altman was there. And I'd gone in through Roger, who I knew. And we were sort of the first corporate deal. And there was a guy named Jimmy Lee at Chemical Bank, I think. I'm not sure they were yet, Chase.
Mm-hmm.
And Jimmy was going to put up the financing. But Jimmy and Henry Silverman called the guys at Time Warner and they go, everybody who runs our companies has to own equity. And they go, well, our guys here, we pay them well. And they go, nope, got to give them equity. So I wound up with 4% of Six Flags, which, mind you, I made a lot of money on MTV. I thought I'd made a lot of money for a kid, but as luck would have it, I wound up with 4% of Six Flags. We bought it for $600 million. We eventually sold 51% for about $1 billion. And then they've sold the rest of it and wound up with $2 billion out of the value of Six Flags. And so that was the first real money I made.
Amazing.
Was that, and it just sort of luck. And I had a plan for...
How long was the period that you...
5 years.
5 years. And did you build more Six Flags in those 5 years?
No, I think we bought one in San Antonio, the eighth one, just as I was leaving from USAA. But I had a whole plan about Six Flags. I had this idea that we were going to try and sort of take what Hertz had done in Avis. We're number 2, we try harder. Right now, there's one theme park, Disney, and everybody else. So we wanted to become the worst in the category with Disney instead of the best in the category without Disney. All of our parks were really big. They were actually bigger than Disneyland. So we had a line bigger than Disneyland, closer to home. And
Great.
so, because we really weren't competing with them. They were destination trips.
Yeah.
Ours were day trips.
Yeah.
If someone said, Six Flags not as good as Disney, I won because they thought of me in the category.
Yeah.
If they said, you're bigger than Dorney
if
Park,
you were in the conversation, you won.
It's what Pepsi did.
Yeah.
Pepsi did the Pepsi Challenge not to compete with Coke, but to get away from all the other soft drinks.
Yeah.
And it became Coke, Pepsi, they won.
Did the parks change at all or no?
Yeah, we did a complete redo. And I'm a creative guy.
Yeah.
They didn't have a designer. They just outsourced it to people draw stuff. I hired a designer. His office was next to mine. And we said, we're going to turn these things back into theme parks. And by the way, when I do a ride, I'm not doing a roller coaster. I'm doing Batman the Ride.
Yeah.
I'm doing stuff that's all, fantasy.
Yeah.
And so we redid the parks and attendance went from it had been stuck at about 17 million for years and years and years. And we got it up to about 25 million by the time we sold the company.
Amazing.
And then we sold it, and then that company sold it to a small theme park company that put the Six Flags brand on lots of other small parks. But so it's nowhere near the same Six Flags it was when I was running it.
LMNT, Element Electrolytes. Have you ever felt dehydrated after an intense workout or a long day in the sun? Do you want to maximize your endurance and feel your best? Add Element Electrolytes to your daily routine. Perform better and sleep deeper. Improve your cognitive function. Experience an increase in steady energy with fewer headaches and fewer muscle cramps. Element Electrolytes. Drink it in the sauna. Refreshing flavors include grapefruit, citrus, watermelon, and chocolate salt. Formulated with the perfect balance of sodium, potassium, and magnesium to keep you hydrated and energized throughout the day. These minerals help conduct the electricity that powers your nervous system so you can perform at your very best. Element Electrolytes are sugar-free, keto-friendly, and great tasting. Minerals are the stuff of life. So visit drinklmnt.com/tetra and stay salty with LMNT Electrolytes. LMNT.
Tell me about the difference between a local anything, radio, versus when it becomes either syndicated or goes national. What's different?
Well, it's interesting. I think ultimately everything is local, and the more local you can make it, the better. With radio stations, I mean, what makes them so popular is it's very local. If you're listening
It's
to
your station.
it's your station, and we're talking about stuff in LA. We're talking about stuff in New York. We're talking about stuff in Memphis. We're talking about stuff in Minneapolis. It's relevant to you. It feels like your next door neighbor because we're talking about the same stuff your next door neighbor would be chatting with you if he was riding to work with you every day. And so I think everything you can make local makes it so much better. And I think it's the secret of it all. Technology has allowed us to do so much more localization. Because in the past, if we wanted a station to sound local, we had to hire people and put them in that market so that they would know what was going on in the market so they could talk about it. Well, you know how good they were at finding out what was going on in the market? Not really good. They didn't know much. The internet wasn't around. When the internet came, you go, wow, I have perfect knowledge of everything going on in this town. But now, actually, don't need you to live in the town anymore because it used to cost us tons of money to broadcast from another town. Doesn't anymore. So, by the way, where do you want to live? Wherever you want to live, you can live. I just need you to be on the air in this town. And I need you to study this town with all the information so you are really relevant. And it has made our stations, smaller markets, so much better.
Yeah.
Large markets, we could already afford great talent, and they were there. But occasionally you got people who, want to be in multiple places. Like we got Ryan Seacrest is on 100 of our radio stations. Charlemagne the God's on, 100 radio stations. So we're able to project and use these sort of really superstar talent in markets. And they're able to go in and do local breaks. So they're doing stuff that's very relevant for the local. Sometimes they have a local person on their desk for that market that also does a lot of the local stuff as well. We're able to get high value talent and make it very, very local.
When did you go to Clear Channel?
I went in 2010 when I left after AOL Time Warner. I was trying to retire before we did the Time Warner merger because I had always told myself that I was going to quit work by the time I was 50 if I made enough money. And when I went to AOL, I originally thought I'd made enough money because of Six Flags, and then I did Century 21 real estate briefly for a year, made a lot of money off that one. And as part of Century 21, I went to AOL and said, I want to be your real estate section. Steve Case says, yes, why don't you be on my board? And I go, well, that might be fun. And then Steve, AOL was in a transition period, losing a lot of money, stock market wasn't great. And Steve said, why don't you come down and help me? And originally run the AOL service, but then became sort of the chief operating officer. We got rid of a couple other businesses. But come down and help me run it. I've been on the board, stay on the board. So Steve and I were the two guys on the board. And I go, well, that sounds like fun. And I've done a year at Century 21, which is all I promised Henry Silverman, who's running the company, I would do. And I'd fixed it up, and we'd taken the profit up 10x. It's like
That's pretty good.
I did what I was supposed to do. And he blessings, okay, go do it. And for once, I didn't need money. So I said, just pay me whatever you want to pay me. And I don't need a contract. And just give me whatever stock you can give me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the least thought out thing I've ever done. And obviously, as things turn out, I made the most money there, made by a long shot. So it sort of was this interesting moment of the world was opening up and I had a front row seat. So when I decided to leave, I mean, we were just been on a tear by the time I think 1999 comes around. We're the 10th most valuable company in America. We're at that time a lot of money, 250 billion. It's a big company back then.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve had an idea that he always wanted to merge with Time Warner. And I thought there was zero chance Jerry would ever do that, having come from Time Warner.
You had already been at Time Warner, and now you're at AOL, and he wants to merge.
I've been at Warner, then Time Warner, and now he wants to merge. When I go, I don't think so. I mean, it's like, good, knock yourself out, have all the conversations you want.
Yeah.
He came back from China. He was on some trip, spent some time with Jerry, and said, I think we can merge. And I'm still very skeptical, think it was no way.
Yeah.
And I'm working on a deal to buy eBay from Meg Whitman, and we're working heavily and making great progress. And Steve goes, it's going to happen. We're going to do it. I go, really? And literally, it's like the week he convinces me it's really going to happen.
Another one of these stories.
And so that weekend, we get the boards together, they all approve it, and we do it. But I said I was going to retire by then. I go, okay. Steve said, look, I need you to stick around for this. I go, okay, I'll stick around for this. And so it's exciting too. And so Steve became the chairman. Levin was the CEO. Parsons and I were co-COOs and sort of split up in the operating groups. So we began that, and I kept thinking, I got to have my moment to leave, because I got to, I worked since I was 15.
Yeah.
And everybody else has said, man, I was backpacked around Europe. I didn't done any of that. I mean, a
All you
long
did was
vacation
work.
for me was all I did was
From
work.
15.
All I did was work. And I was a little bitter. I was like a little mad. 2002, I finally say, Dick, I'm leaving. And I leave thinking I'm going to do nothing. I'm a pilot, and I love to fly.
Yeah.
And by then I have a pretty big airplane. So I go, I'm going to see the world in my plane, and we're just going to do it. And I got 2 young kids then, in addition to my older son. I'm just going to load them up. We're going to go for 6, 7 weeks. We'd even go to Asia for 6 or 7 weeks. I'd throw different kinds of clothes in the back. We'd live out of the plane. But after about 6 months, I'd actually done most of what I thought I wanted to do. And I go, now what? So I did some investing. I raised a small private equity fund, and wasn't really working full time, but if I was working, I worked on that. And 2008 came along, 2009 with that market crash, which scared the hell out of me. I go, wait a minute, you can lose money in private equity? And I go, when I came out of it, we survived and we're okay. I go, man, I'm never doing another fund. Lose my money is one thing, but lose my friend's money is just untenable. So I decided I'd just do some investing myself. Rich Bressler was at T.H. Lee at the time, and he said, hey, look, CEO of Clear Channel stepping down. I know you don't want to work again. You said you'd never be a CEO again, but would you just take a look at it? And I looked at it and go, wait a minute. Do you know what you guys have? I didn't realize how big radio still was. I didn't realize these guys reached everybody in America with a radio station. They were at 90%
I would
reach.
not have guessed that. I
mean,
still wouldn't guess it.
Oh, by the way, more people listen to the radio today than did 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
It's unbelievable.
It is just like, it is a part of people's lives, just a routine. It's like the power.
Yeah.
And so when I started looking at this, I go, man, you don't know what you've got. And he goes, well, that's sort of why I want you to look at it. And so I made an investment. And then they talked me into being the chairman of like the radio group. And just, I said, not full-time, not help.
Yeah.
And then realized they needed a digital product for the service so that people could get the stations other places. And I realized very quickly I didn't know what they were doing. So I go, look, I came out of AOL. I know how to run this process, and we'll figure this out. And so I sort of got hands-on and took over. So we're going to build, which became the iHeartRadio app. And in the process, they go, said you wouldn't be the CEO because you don't work too hard anymore. You're already working hard. Why don't you be the CEO? And I go, you know what? Let me get this thing launched. And I'd had this whole plan that we were going to do this, launch it with what I called Live Aid, like a festival in Vegas for 2 days, just highlight iHeart, and that's going to be it.
Did you change the name of the company from Clear Channel to iHeart?
Yeah. That was the game. I got there, and then I said, look, let me get through it. We launched, and I said, okay, I'll be the CEO, thinking I'll do it for a couple of years, and here I am 15 years later.
Yeah. How many stations does it have?
We got about 850 stations.
Mm-hmm. Is that similar to what it had when you bought in?
And we are the number 1 podcast publisher by a mile. We have the number 1 digital radio app. Obviously, our events, all of those tent poles are huge, whether it's Jingle Ball or Festival or the award show or the country festival or the alter ego show, are all in their own rights, major events. So we've really expanded what the company is. We've really gotten into data and, began to use that, built out the ad tech. Ironically, the advertising that works the best by far is broadcast radio advertising.
Really?
What all the advertisers want is all the digital stuff, which is ironic since the digital reaches so much less.
Yeah.
Ad-supported Spotify or ad-supported Pandora reach about 20% of America. We reach 90%. So no matter how good your message is, only 20% are hearing it. And so what makes radio work so well is, one, everybody takes us to work with them every day. They listen to us at work. They listen to us on the way home. They listen to us in the morning when they're getting dressed at home. And radio just clobbers it. But it's the hardest advertising to sell because all the agencies go, I want digital advertising. I'm set up my whole company to buy digital advertising. You're out of the mainstream here. It's harder for me to buy it. And I go, well, shouldn't you want the best stuff? The answer is no. You should want the stuff that fits your process.
Wow.
So we re-engineered how you can sell broadcast radio. So it looks like digital. We have to get the data. We have to get the same information available and the technology. So, hands on keyboards can buy instead of phone calls and faxes.
Yeah. When do you follow data and when do you go against data?
Research is not policymaking. It just answers questions for you, and then you have to make a gut decision. So the only difference between looking at data and no data is something has conditioned my thinking, my gut a little bit. I still have to make a gut decision.
Yeah.
Research never tells you what to do, and I think that's a misconception about it. And I always look at research. I want to know everything I can know before I make a decision.
Yeah.
And I'm still going to be wrong a lot of time.
Yeah.
We did a study 2 years ago with Malcolm Gladwell. It was looking at real America versus marketers. Because my problem is marketers go, oh, everybody listens. You don't know what you're talking about. So we did a study just to highlight it. And at that time, Succession was the big show on TV for all of our friends. 100% of marketers had heard of Succession. 2/3 of real Americans had never heard of Succession. 2/3 of Americans had never heard of an Aperol Spritz. 1/3 had never heard of a charcuterie board. The number one and two sports, participatory sports, are not pickleball and golf. It's cornhole and bowling. And by the way, hunting and fishing's in the top 5. And it's just people are so out of touch with what real America's looking at. And by the way, there are 2 things that real America really is important to them that marketers are afraid of: the military and religion. 80% of Americans still are of faith, go to church.
Yeah.
Maybe not all the time.
80%.
80%.
Yeah.
But if I in a meeting and I say, well, let's show somebody in church, or let's get the pastor. What are you, crazy? You can't touch that. That's so controversial. Actually, it turns out it's not real America. And we did the study not to say to marketers, you're idiots, but to say, don't trust your instinct.
Yeah.
Look at your data.
Yeah.
Now make a gut decision. Math and magic. Look at the math. Now put the magic in. And you got to do something creative with it. And it's usually not the obvious thing. The obvious thing is usually the worst thing to do. The most creative is sort of out of the blue,
Yeah.
but still is geared toward that.
You said your dad was a minister.
Yeah.
Tell me what it's like growing up with a minister dad.
It's interesting. My dad was, I'd say he's a minister, and people conjure up these ideas of fire and brimstone, but he actually was really well educated from Mississippi. Went to graduate school at Emory in Atlanta, which was a very liberal school at the time, to divinity school, had a college degree. My mom had a college degree, which was, I think my brother told me, 2% of households in Mississippi had 2 parents that were both college graduates, much less grad school. And my dad was a real thinker about stuff. Like when I was a kid and everybody's misbehaving, my dad would say, look, I can't tell you what to do. You're going to make your own decisions. So the only thing I'm going to ask you to do is just listen to me before you make your decision, and then I trust you'll make the right decision. So, and when I was later in life, when somebody's doing something bad, I say, "What do you think of that, Dad?" He said, "I believe in the redemptive power of love, about forgiveness, love, and no anger, no hate." In my household, the dirty word was hate. We couldn't say hate. My mother would say, honey, we don't hate anybody. We don't hate. And if somebody were just a despicable human being, my mother would say, I wonder why they want to be that way. So that was the household I grew up in. And my brother and I talk about how lucky we were to have that kind of household where there was just enormous amount of unconditional love,
Beautiful.
a lot of support. And in the church was, for me, I'm not a regular churchgoer, but I would say I have certainly faith or spirituality. When you grow up in the household, you hear your dad have too many conversations about so-and-so in the congregations wants it named after them, or they want that pew for them, or they got to, and just go, the politics. But what came through was really the power of service to others. I always loved the Hard Rock Cafe had that slogan. What was it? Love all, serve all.
Yeah.
And I go, I like that. Love all, serve all.
Yeah.
It's like, why wouldn't I help people? Mo Austin I just love Mo.
Me too.
And Mo was one of those guys that and I'm going to contrast him to Walter Yetnikoff. Walter Yetnikoff, when something was going on, Walter would figure out how he had an angle to get you.
Yes.
When something was going that wasn't great, Mo would call you up and say, what can I do to help?
Yeah.
And you know who got the most benefit from that? Mo. Because, you know, when Walter tried to screw me or get something, you know, you say, I'm not going to get that guy anything or any power. I don't have to. Mo, you go, I want to do everything for Mo. Look at Mo's always
The
helping me.
best.
And he did favors for people every time he could do it, only because he could do the favor.
Yep.
Not because he expected anything in return.
No.
And I love people in business like that. And I think some of that probably came from my dad, my mom, and my childhood, and where and how I grew up.
Would you see your dad speak in church?
Oh, yeah. My dad
What was that like? Tell me
Yeah,
about
was just
that.
the preacher. But, you know, it was funny in those days. I guess still now, the sermon was always trying to be relevant.
Yeah.
Like what, you know, like
What's
he's talking
going on
about
in the news.
A Woody Allen movie or,
Yeah.
you know, the TV show or something to make these values relevant. Because what is the sermon about? Is how do we get through life? You know, how do we cope? What should we do? What's
How
the
many
right
people
thing?
would be in church?
In those days, it was a lot of people, but maybe 250.
It's a lot.
Yeah. And,
Would you be proud of them when you'd see them?
yeah, I don't think you do. You know, kids and parents, you don't sort of have that emotion. Later in life, I'm
Yeah.
very proud of it.
Yeah,
But at the time, that's just what my dad did.
I see.
And I was sort of the kid. Preacher's kids came in two colors. One that looked like preachers and the other that looked like, ooh, who's that kid? My brother was the first. I was the latter.
Yeah.
And probably spent too much time trying to prove I wasn't a preacher. But my dad knew what was going on. It's interesting. When my oldest son was having some teenage problems, and I must have been bitching about it. And my dad says, you know what? There's nothing he does that's so bad that's worth losing your line of communication over. And I thought, my dad knew a lot more about what I was doing
Wow.
than he let on.
Wow.
He just revealed
That's
the
deep
secret.
wisdom.
And I've repeated that to other people
Yeah.
who get kids going through it and go, nothing is worth losing your line of communication over. Don't make too big a deal about it.
Wow.
They'll get through it.
That's beautiful. Do you pray?
You know, I think I pray in a different way. I'm not sure who I'm praying to or what,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel absolutely connected to other
Connected.
consciousness. And I think it's ridiculous to think that there's not something else going on here.
Mm-hmm.
I've had sort of an interesting relationship with my mom, who my mother always wanted a girl in the family. There hadn't been a girl since the 1890s in the Pittman family. And my daughter was finally born, Lucy Pittman. My mother was alive. This was like the greatest thing in the world, the daughter. I talked to my mother on a Sunday night, and I was down in Mexico. I said, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. I'm going to fly through Jackson, see you. The nanny comes down and was up with the kids. And she comes down and says, wow, Lucy woke up in the night and was screaming for me. Delmy, come. And she said, I walked toward the room and there was a light on the room. I had to leave a light on in the room. And I said, Lucy, and the light went off. And she said, I went in the room and I go, Lucy, what's going on? She said, there's somebody in the room. And she says, she looks around and goes, Lucy, there's no one in the room. It's okay. And she said, I talked her into going back to sleep, and she finally went back to sleep. An hour later, my brother called and said, Mom died in her sleep last night. And I go, wow, this is on her way out. She comes to see Lucy.
That is wild.
So all of us in the family talked to my mom. And my daughter, who, you know, barely remembers my mother, prays to her. It's
Yeah.
like, help me.
Yes. Beautiful story. It's amazing the mystical experiences that we can have if we're open and pay attention.
Yeah.
There really is magic in the world.
I'm completely convinced that you know, we're all connected there. And, you know, I sat with my dad when he died and held his hand, my brother and I, and sort of talked him through it. He was sort of struggling. We go, Dad, it's okay. You're doing great. You can go.
Yeah.
And he left,
Yeah.
but he was still breathing.
Yeah.
The body was still breathing. The heart was still, and my brother and I both looked at each other and he just left.
Yeah.
He left this body, and the body goes on for a little while. And then a couple hours later, it stops breathing and the heart stops. And my mother, I talked to her about stuff. And I think, am I making this up? Am I just like, am I
Yeah.
putting words up there
Yeah.
and just, and I go, why would I be thinking that? I mean, where did it come from? And I do think we have that capability to connect. One of the awful things we do is we try and talk people out of intuition, of just that feeling. And when I was a young kid, 20, 21, I went with my girlfriend to this thing called Silva Mind Control. And what they basically teach you is go down the level, like you're meditating, go in a room, put a screen up and put up stuff you need the answers to or that you want to visualize to see happen. And at the last day, you go around the room. There are like 300 people in a ballroom somewhere. I don't know any of them. And they say, go to 10 different people. And they tell you someone's name. And you tell them what's wrong with the person. And I hit 10 on 10.
Wow.
But when I hit them, I would say, I'm not sure anything. I have cancer. And they go, right. And what they're teaching you is, well, why did you say cancer instead of diabetes? That's actually an answer. You don't trust it because it didn't it's like, but it just came to you.
Yeah.
Just say what comes to you.
Yeah. It's subtle, but it's in us.
And by the way, all of us who've done creative work,
Yes.
it is like the stuff that just comes to you is usually the right answer.
Yeah.
You know, this whole thing of don't overthink it.
And usually it's not our idea.
Right.
Do you know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's not like
Absolutely.
you can't really take credit for it, even though it does come through you.
Right. It's just
It
there.
just is. It's just there.
It's just there.
And you
it
just
is,
see it that way.
and by the way, and the stuff I have done that's really great is stuff like a meteor hit me in the head.
Yeah.
It wasn't planned out. It wasn't worked out. It's just like, it's the epiphanies. And at work, I preach to people that what really makes the difference in our business are the 2 or 3 epiphanies you have, not the day-to-day process. That just sort of keeps the train running.
Mhm.
What makes the difference are those epiphanies where you go, I got it. Wait a minute. And we all have times of the day we do that. Mine is, I wake up in the night with them sometimes, and I do it, and I take a nice hot shower in the morning, sort of meditative shower, and the answers come to me. If I just got a block, I can't write something, suddenly I got it all in my head.
In the shower.
I rush out and write down a speech, a promo, a spot, or something that I've been struggling with. It just comes to me.
And if you don't write it down, it might go away.
It goes away. And,
Yeah.
and it's interesting because I've, talked to people about this creative process that, it seems the one I believe works is when we load ourselves up with all the facts
Mhm.
and then forget about it.
Yeah.
And then one day, in the most unexpected places, the answer comes to you
Yeah. You're not thinking about it.
at all. It just
It's
flows.
just, yes.
I got it. Now, somebody like David Eagleman, who's the great neuroscientist from
Mhm.
Stanford,
Mhm.
will say your subconscious has been working on it.
Mhm.
He calls the conscious mind the broom closet in the mansion of your mind. That most of us is the unconscious, the subconscious.
Mhm.
And he said the subconscious is working all the time. And when it's got something ready, it just hands it to you. I don't know whether it's that or whether it's the cosmic, we're all tied together, or maybe
Either way,
a little of both. Right.
all good.
And he uses this example. He said, you are sitting in a busy restaurant and you hear somebody say your name. Well, they said my name. And he goes, how did you hear that? He said, actually, your subconscious has been listening to everything that hits your eardrums. It only makes you aware of something when it's relevant.
Yeah.
And it explains a lot.
You've talked about making decisions very quickly and moving things fast. Are there times not to move fast?
Yeah, when you have a crisis, you got to take a beat because your first reaction is going to be hysteria.
I see.
And I just think, you take a beat, you just try and detach yourself a little bit and do it. But
It's almost the opposite of what most people would do. Most people would take time ruminating over something where there's no time pressure associated. And then in an emergency, they deal in the moment.
yeah. And in an emergency, say, okay, when do I have to have a decision? Well, we got to make an announcement by tomorrow morning. Okay, then we have until tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Let's think about it a little bit. Let's sort of go through it and then ideate a bit.
Mm-hmm. Are all businesses the same?
On one level, yes. And if you love business, which I love, I can be as excited about Six Flags theme parks and Century 21 real estate as I am about America Online or iHeart. Business is an ultimate game. And with my kids, you try and explain to them, why am I working so hard? And I think the best answer I ever had, someone told me this, I forgot who told me, but boy, is it right. Said, don't tell your kids that you don't like work and you're sorry you're working, because then they go, well, why the hell are you leaving me if you don't like it? Tell them you love it. And so I tell my kids, work for me is like a video game for you.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get up in the morning and start playing. At the end of the day, I don't want to put it away. And I just love thinking about stuff. I love the sort of the chess pieces that move around. Like, oh, we can move this over here or this over here. By the time I go to bed, I've been working on this stuff and thinking about it. Think about it in the night. I wake up sometimes, I have to make a couple of notes, but it just occupies my mind and keeps me stimulated. So on that level, all businesses say. I could get excited about whether it's a business doing, $100,000 a year or a business doing, 40 billion in revenue. They
It's
all have
just
the same.
problem solving, really?
I think it's problem solves. It's also the creative. It's the math and the magic.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty good at math. I've got sort of a math mind, and I get really excited about the magic part. And I just love other people who have the magic part. I love the debates. By the way, I love the math people too. I do long debates with research people all the time. Well, I don't think it's showing us that. I think it's showing us this. How are we going to interpret that? And it's that, again, that camaraderie
Yeah.
that comes from a process. And I think, look, you talked earlier about community. You threw it in a couple of times. I think it's about, we love our community. And business is my community. And the company I'm with is my community, my people, my team. And there's nothing I can't do for them. It's just like we're in it together.
How much of your particular skill set do you think you learned in school?
None.
None.
I mean, no, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but like I went to probably the worst public school in America, Brookhaven, Mississippi. There were a couple of teachers who were really great. Sadly, in that era, if you were a woman, you didn't have many opportunities for jobs. So there were some brilliant women that were teachers that today would be investment bankers or lawyers or doctors or physicists or scientists or something. But back then, they were teachers. And I got a lot from them. I was a good learner. I had really good grades, and I did really well on the standardized test. But I was always just looking for something that interested me. I think some of my success is I'm not well educated, smart, but not well educated.
Yeah.
So I never learned the wrong way to do stuff.
Yeah.
When I was 30, I went back to when I was at MTV and they were preparing me to be the CEO because I was too young. They were apoplectic that I wasn't a college graduate. I'd only done 3 years of college, never done my senior year. And so they put me in this advanced management program at the Harvard Business School, 13 weeks. And it's people who were sort of going to CEO next, go do this. And so I went, and my first observation was, now I know why people are asking me the wrong questions about my business.
Yeah.
They learned it in school.
Yeah.
That wasn't coming out of their head. They were just repeating something.
Yeah.
And I think not knowing allowed me to see things differently than others. I mean, we did MTV. I didn't know I was doing anything different. I was just doing what seemed like the logical thing to do. And so other people maybe say, oh my God, we're being disruptive. I did a lot of disruptive things in my career. I never once thought I was being disruptive.
Yeah.
I thought I was just,
Yeah. You didn't know what you were disrupting.
I was just like doing what seems to be, we need this. Here's the way you do it.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was disrupting it. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't know I was disrupting it.
Yeah. How do technical innovations change existing business models?
You know what? I think they open up opportunities. In my business career, I think there's only one rule that I always follow. The consumer wants convenience. And if I can find something they like doing and make it easier, I'll have a winning product. So I'm constantly in search of what makes this easier. And when people say, here's a new business, and they go, well, you got to go 2 more steps. I go, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, and you just push a button, it all happens. I go, that's going to work. So I have these sort of prisms I put it through, but put it through because I understand the consumer. And what I can't do a B2B business. I wouldn't know what to do. But I know consumer business as well, because the consumer's the same consumer, whether I'm
And they've
trying
always been your whole life.
whether I'm selling them a house at
'Cause
Century
people are
21 or
people.
trying to get them to watch MTV or trying to get them to listen to whatever, it's the same consumer.
Yeah.
And so they behave in a very reliable way if you really study them and listen to them.
What's the status of AM radio today?
It's surprising. It's still there and still doing well. It doesn't have the audience it once had. But what's interesting is in time of need, people go to the AM. There's a wildfire here. You know where they're going? To KFI. KFI and KNX out here. And KFI is ours. And by the way, we are 24 hours. All the feeds during the fires came from KFI. People know AM is there, and it's their safety. When a hurricane comes along, when a tornado comes, when terrible disaster comes, they go to the AM station. AM stations also tend to be pretty battle hardened. So when the storms hit the Carolinas, remember that?
Yeah.
There were places where there was no cell service, there was no TV, there was nothing except a couple of AM stations. They got every bit of their information from the AM stations. When things are really terrible, they may not have an AM radio in the house. They go into their car, which has a battery. They turn it on and listen to AM radio.
Yeah.
And they get and we know our job, by the way, is Our job is to serve the community.
Mhm.
Normally, that's keep them entertained, keep them, companionship. In a disaster, it changes. It is like stop what you're doing, do nothing but give these people critical information they need. If there's a flood in Houston, you'll hear people on the air calling in. I'm on top of my house. Where are you? We're going to send a boat for you. We're connecting boats to people and getting people out of these problems.
Mm.
And that to me, you always want a bigger sense of purpose in what you do in life. And I think for all of us who work in radio, the bigger sense of purpose is we know we serve the community, and those AM stations are an integral part of serving that community. Maybe we don't get as big an audience, maybe we don't make as
Yeah.
much money on them, but when you got to serve the community, give me my AM stations because they allow me to do something that the FMs can't do.
Could you imagine any additional use for AM considering how robust it is and how it covers the country that's not happening now?
It doesn't have a lot of spectrum
Mhm.
with it. So you say, hey, I could repurpose it. You can't do a lot with that amount of spectrum. It's
Mhm.
like dial-up modem kind of
Yeah.
spectrum. But it is, I think the best thing we can do is you sort of say, what's the service of radio? Keep people company. What higher purpose is to keep people company? I mean, you and I have plenty of friends who would probably make friends easily. A lot of people in America don't, and they're lonely. Was it 50% of Americans talk about having bouts of loneliness?
Mm.
And young kids, I just saw some study that was like, it was 4 statements which are predictor of depression. They were hanging at about the 20% range until about 2015, and then they took off up to about 50%. And you go, these people need somebody to hang out with. They need somebody who's not judgmental. They need somebody who's just sounds friendly and nice and gives them the information they're looking for and sounds interested in them.
Yeah.
And I just think, when you sort of think about higher purpose, I go back to my dad as the minister. What higher purpose than just to put your arm around somebody and say, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Give
Beautiful.
you a hug.
How has social media impacted the radio business?
It's expanded it because before social media, Elvis Duran, Ryan Seacrest, Charlemagne the God, they would talk about things on the radio, but would have no idea whether the listener was responding unless they happened to call the request line. And you only had so many lines, and they're probably not very scientific. Today, if you watch them, they're all watching social as the show's going on. Ryan probably is the master of this. What's catching on? And if it's catching on, is it catching on the way or is it going left or right? And they can now move. And so these shows stay extraordinarily relevant to people in real time. And what else is real time out there? And nothing has this audience. I mean, we reach more people in the month than Facebook does. We reach more people in a month than Google does. And so when you've got this kind of reach, it's like, how do you stay relevant? And social allows us to stay in tune with that audience every minute.
Tell me about your media consumption habits.
I probably live on social too much.
Mm-hmm.
I listen to radio a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Probably if I'm on TV, I'm just watching news. And then I'll watch the streaming services. My partner is in the movie and TV business, so she's always got something we should see.
Mm-hmm.
So she sort of keeps me relevant and watching interesting stuff. And I read every newspaper online. I read probably about 6 of them in the morning and check them hourly or through the day. I'm sort of a news junkie.
Are you as in love with flying as you've ever been?
I have been, but I've just stopped flying. I've gotten to the age where the insurance company basically says, Mr. Pittman, will insure you, but not with the liability limits you've had. And I go, I can't fly. And the truth is probably my reflexes are not what they were. I used to ride motorcycles a lot in my early 60s. I go, my reflexes aren't quite as good, so I'm going to give up motorcycles.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I ride in the back. First time after 50 years.
Yeah.
And I don't go to the cockpit.
How does it feel?
It feels a little weird, but in some ways, this is probably a statement about aging. When I was a young guy, I used to love to learn to fly a new plane. I used to love to go to flight school every year. And I used to love all that stuff. And as I got older, it was a chore to go like, I got to go to school again. I got to go that again this year. And sometimes when there's really a particularly rough night and the weather's bad, and I know what the guys are going through up there, I go, sort of nice to be back here.
Yeah.
I'm not sweating.
Yeah.
They're sweating. I mean, look, I've flown with those guys, and I've flown the simulator with them, and training with them in the past.
Yeah.
So I know what they're going through, and we know each other. So, I have an appreciation of what goes on. But I still love airplanes, and I flew helicopters and airplanes and just sort of stopped both. If I weren't working, I would probably do the extra time to go, okay, let me go work with the insurance company and try and convince them
Yeah.
and do. But I go, 50 years, that's good.
How did the technology of planes change over your life?
Look, when I started, flew very small airplanes and piston engines, and those got a little more sophisticated. But at a certain point, I could afford to fly a turboprop, and then did that, and then I finally afford to fly.
What's different about
jets.
a turboprop?
A
than a prop?
turboprop's got a jet engine spinning a propeller
I see.
and a turbine. And then, when you go to jets, you've got a turbine that, you don't have the propeller on it, although you got a turbofan, which is a hidden way propeller. So that changed. And we learned a lot more about sort of the mechanics of it. And that was great. But what really has changed is the avionics, the navigation, the radios, et cetera. And if you think about what changes on an airplane and makes an airplane dated,
Yeah.
it's usually the avionics.
Mm.
And on my plane, I've had the one I have now for 10 or 12 years. I have ripped out twice the avionics and put
And
it all new
replaced it.
stuff because it's just
It's all computerized, I imagine.
and then the technology's just changed
It's
so
so much
much that
better.
you go, okay, yeah, we need that. But it's not the engines or the wings or that stuff don't change that much.
What do you attribute the interest in country music in our culture lately?
I think country music has always been an interest in country music, and it sort of goes up and down, and it goes in cycles. Remember Urban Cowboy and, that moment, oh, there's Rhinestone Cowboy. Yeah, I mean,
Cowboy, yeah.
there are moments when it comes along. And I did this country music station back in 1974 in Chicago, knew nothing about country. And it used to be Howdy Partner. And what was different about our station was I made it sound like it was top 40. And I hired a lot of old top 40 disc jockeys from the top 40 station in town, WLS.
Mhm.
And we did giveaways. We sounded cosmopolitan. Except we were playing country music.
Mhm.
Now, people in country thought I was the devil because I was like changing it, but we didn't play to type.
Yeah.
We just played like it said we're normal people playing country
It's
music.
music.
And I think we're seeing the same thing here. And I think, the more people who sort of touch country, it helps.
There was a story a couple of months ago about the MTV News library being erased. Did you hear that story?
Yeah.
Why would
you erase anything?
Why would you erase a library that you own? What's happening?
I don't know. It is.
Is there any answer you can come up with why it could possibly happen?
Well, because somebody says, oh, you know how much money it costs us to store that stuff, and we have to have an archivist, and we can get rid of that job. It's the only possible reason I can think of. I once did a show called the Morton Downey Jr. Show.
Yeah.
And when we finished the show,
It was a great show, by the way.
I mean, he broke all of them.
It was a great show.
He was a crazy guy. I mean,
Yeah.
in the end, it was still a show where the producer cancels their own show. But it was, he did so many breakthroughs in that show. But we finished with it, and then we've got all these tapes, and we'll say, what are we going to do with them? And people say, well, no, but throw them away. And I go, well, we can't throw it. To this day, I pay Iron Mountain to store those tapes. They're probably sawdust by now or dust to dust, but I can't bring myself to be the one to say I'm going to erase anything that's ever existed.
I'm glad you're not erasing them.
It is crazy, huh?
Yeah.
Well, it's like all those Tonight Show shows that were erased way back when.
Wow.
That was like, why?
Wow.
How much money could you possibly be saving? And by the way, if you look at the history, every time you have something, you always make money on it in the future. There's
Always.
another window. There's another use.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
It's crazy.
Tell me about the podcast. Tell me about Math and Magic.
When we first started getting into podcasting and began to be a pretty major publisher, I go, I'd like to do one, but just for like marketers, because I talk to advertisers all the time, and
Mhm.
I do a podcast, not for the general public, but for them. And I want to start off with people I know pretty well, because I know a lot of stories about them, all this stuff, but what I'm trying to drag out of them are those lessons that
Mhm.
you could use insights. And so it's fun to do. And I really surprisingly enjoyed it, although I get lazy and will go, maybe I'm going to be maybe vacation time 6 months before I do another season. We do great research and the people help, but I write the whole thing. And the hardest thing is to go, what's an angle I can talk about on this person that others don't know? Or what do I know about this person? Or what do I see here? And, once I've got that, writing the questions it all gets pretty easy, but it's trying to get that construct right. But I love it. And it's a great way for me to stay current. Even though I know people, even old friends, I do the research and I go, I didn't know that. But it's also, it's a great way for me with friends to bring up stories too about, what contributions like Fred Seibert at MTV, Fred's the guy that did the on-air look. And, it's great to sort of give him the kudos and to put it down in an archive that, he did. So many people want to tell the story of things I've done who weren't even in the room. I don't
Yeah.
even know them. How could
Yeah.
they possibly know?
Yeah, they don't.
And so it's interesting. I mean, the people did these documentaries on MTV, and I go, who are they talking to? And actually, I did a Math and Magic. I've interviewed all the people who founded MTV with me, and I edited together the real story of MTV.
Great.
And just took the pieces and just go, let's tell
Great.
the story, because we were all in the room.
Yeah, and it's the only way you'll ever really know.
Yeah, it's an archive. I think there's a value in some
sure.
of the podcasts I love doing for people is I want them to have a record of what they did.
Yes.
And so what I'm trying to do in 45 minutes is give the story of who this person is. And it's like Walter Isaacs. I did Walter, and when I sent Walter from Time down to be the CEO of CNN. And when we had 9/11 happened and all the news was about 9/11, you couldn't get any other news. So Walter had this idea to put the scroll at the bottom that every news channel does today. He did it so he could put the other news there, even though they were covering 9/11.
That's when it started.
And that was Walter who did that.
Wow.
And no one had ever given Walter the credit for it. So,
Great
it's my
story.
podcast. It's great to say, okay, Walter, we're putting it on the record. You're the guy that did that.
Tetragrammaton is a podcast. Tetragrammaton is a website. Tetragrammaton is a whole world of knowledge.
What may fall within the sphere of Tetragrammaton? Counterculture? Tetragrammaton. Sacred geometry? Tetragrammaton. The avant-garde? Tetragrammaton. Generative art? Tetragrammaton. The tarot? Tetragrammaton. Out-of-print music? Tetragrammaton. Biodynamics? Tetragrammaton. Graphic design? Tetragrammaton. Mythology and magic? Tetragrammaton. Obscure film? Tetragrammaton. Beach culture? Tetragrammaton. Esoteric lectures? Tetragrammaton. Off-the-grid living? Tetragrammaton. Alt spirituality? Tetragrammaton. The canon of fine objects? Tetragrammaton. Muscle cars? Tetragrammaton. Ancient wisdom for a new age. Upon entering, experience the artwork of the day. Take a breath and see where you are drawn.
Tetragrammaton.com